It's National Reading Month, folks, and here on Casa Style, we want to make sure we get your hands on the books that are written by our very own New Mexico authors. Today, we're talking with Jim Eccles. He is the author of Pocketful of Rockets. Jim, thank you for coming in. This sounds like, this book sounds right up my alley. New Mexico history, we're talking about sacred space down south of us, White Sands, that whole area. So, how did you come to write this book? You've got a long history in this area.
I worked at White Sands for 30 years, and to do my job answering questions from the public and the news media, I had to learn a lot about the range. And in that process, I collected stories and information, and eventually I started telling those stories. And people came up to me and said, you know, you ought to write that down. And then towards the end, they said, you ought to write a book.
Right.
So when I retired, I did that, and Pocketful of Rockets is that result.
So, let's talk a little bit about what this book covers, because you know, you look at it and you might think just about the White Sands Missile Range, but the history goes much further back.
Correct.
So what do you cover in this book?
It's not a litany of missiles and rockets, for starters.
Right, okay.
I go back to talk, say, the Mogollon Indian culture 1,000 years ago, because there are pictographs and other remains of their culture on the missile range, the Apache. Talk about the ranchers and how they made a living with goats and cattle on the range, and how they lost their property in the Second World War when the military moved in. And then it's a mix, a great variety. I've got a big chapter on Trinity Site, where the first atomic bomb was tested. Contrast that, there's a chapter on Victoria Peak, where the gold treasure, the 100 tons of gold, is supposedly buried. I delve into the Roswell mystery and folklore, legend, whatever you want to call it, because a lot of the programs at White Sands and Holloman are probably responsible for setting that myth into motion and stuff.
So potentially what happened there could have something to do with what was going on at White Sands and Holloman.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
I cover important visitors. For instance, I got to meet Walter Cronkite when he was still doing CBS Evening News.
Wow.
We took him out to Trinity Site. A number of other people have come to visit, and so some of that's covered. Space programs are covered. The shuttle landed at White Sands, of course, back in 1982.
That's right.
There are other space-related programs. The V2 that came into White Sands at the beginning got the United States into the space age by putting scientific payloads on rockets, sending them up into the upper atmosphere, and getting those first looks at what's up there.
That's great. Well, so you mentioned you talk about Trinity now. You're going to be down at Trinity in April. Is that right?
The open house will be April 5th, and I go back as a volunteer now that I've retired, and I'll be there answering questions, and if people come by and want to talk about the book, we can do that as well.
Okay. And if people want to get a copy of Pocketful of Rockets, how do they
The easiest way is directly from Amazon. Amazon.com, you can order it. I don't know if any bookstores here in Albuquerque actually carry it yet.
Okay, great. Well, hopefully that will change very soon so we can buy local and also support a local author. Jim, such a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And we'll have more information on our website at casa.com under the Style tab.